Hello, and welcome to Haunted Slumber. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy slow, haunting stories that gently carry you toward peaceful sleep, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, get comfortable. Let your body grow still, and let the sounds of the outside world quietly fade into silence. Tonight, as the night deepens, the whispers grow softer, and an old story begins to unfold. So close your eyes, listen carefully, let the darkness soothe your mind, and let sleep guide you into haunted slumber. Story 1, was it the British again? Were you hurt, Mr. Vice President? Who did this to you? The questions came one after another, fast and desperate, while camera flashes burst across the hospital room like tiny storms of white light. Microphones were pushed forward from every direction. Reporters shouted over each other, trying to get closer to the thin, wild-haired man tied down in the hospital bed. That was how it began, or at least that was how I remember it beginning. The man on the screen was Mr. Petrovi, the Vice President of Serbia, though he looked nothing like a man of power in that moment. His hair stood out in messy gray wires around his head. His eyes were wide and bloodshot. His wrists had been strapped to the bed rails, but he still fought against the restraints as though he could tear himself free if only he screamed loudly enough. "These people are turning my men," he shouted. "My family too. I decide who I choose to side with. This is not some banana state. When the evidence is clear, I'm telling you, I'll have a nice story for you. My old friends out there, you will read about yourselves in awe." The director slammed the remote down on the conference table. The screen went black. The room fell silent at once. He turned slowly and looked around at all of us. His face was stern, but not angry in the usual way. This was colder than anger. This was the look of a man who had been embarrassed in front of people far more powerful than himself, and was now searching for someone under him to blame. We were seated around the long table like schoolchildren waiting to be punished. No one moved. No one breathed too loudly. Some people stared at their notes. Others looked at the black television screen, as if hoping it might come back on and save them from the director's attention. That, the director said, was Mr. Petrovi the day before yesterday. His voice was calm, but every word landed heavily. Some of you on the Serbian desks have watched him for decades. You know what kind of man he is. He was an irritation before taking power, a problem while in power, and a disaster for us when he refused to leave power. A few people lowered their eyes. He is writing a book about our agency's history in Yugoslavia, the director continued. And he is going to name names. I shifted in my chair. I felt my shirt sticking slightly to my back. My mouth had gone dry. I tried to keep my face still, but my eyes moved to the right without my permission. My assistant, Nicholas, was sitting beside me. His face looked pale under the conference room lights, and under the table his knees were trembling. Not subtly. Not the nervous shake of a man trying to hide his fear. They were shaking openly, almost shamelessly. The director went on. This interview, and yes, I will make the full tape available for anyone who wants to review it, continues for some time. In it, Petrovi claims someone approached him. He says someone tried to turn him. He says it was us. He says he has proof. A small sound went through the room. Not a gasp, more like a shared tightening of everyone's throat. Our Prime Minister, the director said, would like to know if there is any truth at all in this accusation. I have already assured him there is nobody so reckless on my senior staff. Not now. Not with another war possibly sitting on the horizon. His eyes moved around the table again. I could feel them pass over me. I kept still. The meeting ended soon after that, though I barely heard the rest of what was said. There were instructions, files to check, teams to assign, reports to prepare. All the normal movements of a machine trying to look controlled while something burned inside it. As soon as the emergency all-hands meeting was over, I went straight to the men's room. I did not walk there. I almost lunged. Once inside, I turned on the tap and set the water warm. Steam rose quickly from the basin. I bent over and splashed my face again and again, trying to force my breathing to slow down. Deep breaths. In, out, again. It had been too long since I had last looked at myself properly in a mirror. I had become good at avoiding my own reflection. Men in my line of work often do. You start by hiding your thoughts from others, then one day you realize you have been hiding from yourself too. But I could not fall apart. Not here, not in the building, not in front of my assistant, and bitterly not in front of my brother-in-law. The door opened behind me. Nicholas limped in on his crutches. His timing was perfect, of course. It always was. I kept my hands on the edge of the sink and stared down into the running water. Someone tried to turn, I said. Tried it and failed. Was this Crossgate? The turn was one of our agency's oldest tricks. The polite version was that we built relationships with foreign political figures. The honest version was that we tempted, pressured, blackmailed, or bought second-rate presidential candidates and pushed them toward power. In exchange, they became our eyes and ears. Sometimes they became more than that. Sometimes they became a whole government wearing another country's flag. Crossgate had been meant to be different. After the Cold War, the old methods looked too clumsy, too visible. Crossgate was designed as a possible successor, but officially it was only a tabletop exercise, a wargaming idea, a theoretical tool, a plan that should never have left paper. Or so I had believed. Nicholas leaned against the wall beside the sinks. His crutches clicked softly against the tile. "You're asking me a direct question, sir?" He whispered. "I thought you were never going to do that." I turned my head just enough to glare at him. There were many things I regretted in my career. There were operations I should have stopped, men I should have trusted less, and secrets I should never have signed my name under. But the greatest regret was not failing to turn Petrovi years earlier, when he had still been only a minister of foreign affairs. No, my greatest regret was bringing my foolish sister Claire to the agency's Christmas party the year before. I had told her not to come. I had made excuses. I said it would be boring. I said she would hate everyone there. I said it was not her kind of place, but Claire had always liked to do the opposite of what I suggested, and I had finally allowed it. That was when she met Nicholas. I still remembered how she looked at him, like she had seen a ghost she wanted to love. Nicholas was thin, pale, and strange, but there was something in his face that reminded her of our father. The same tired eyes, the same careful smile, the same way of sounding gentle while making everyone nearby feel controlled. Electra complex, some therapist might have said. Daddy issues, in less polite language. Whatever the name was, Claire fell for him quickly, too quickly. Despite all my protests, despite all my warnings, there was no stopping her. By spring, she was seeing him seriously. By summer, she was engaged. By winter, he was not just my assistant, he was my brother-in-law. Nicholas had always been a slimy little bat of a man. He had risen through the agency faster than anyone should have. Officially, it was because he was clever and useful. Unofficially, people said he had blackmailed each superior just enough to move ahead. I never had proof, but I believed it. Men like Nicholas never climb cleanly. I had known it was only a matter of time before he came for my position as section chief in Southeast Europe. It did not help that the director seemed to like him. More than like him, really, there was an unnatural softness in the director's voice whenever he spoke to Nicholas. He trusted him in a way he trusted no one else. I had never understood it. Now Nicholas stood beside the wash basin, trembling slightly, leaning on crutches, and watching me as if he had been waiting for this moment. I narrowed my eyes. He finally gave in. "Rumor is the Russians got to Petrovy first," he said. I turned fully toward him. "And you did not tell me this before? You never wanted to hear it before. You never made a mistake before." Nicholas's mouth twitched. It might have been fear. It might have been amusement. "As if Petrovy would give up his reign and his ideology for the Russians," I said. "And as if he would do it because of someone like you." Nicholas said nothing. My anger rose. The steam from the sink thickened around us, making the room feel smaller. "Let me get this straight, Nicky boy," I snapped. "I gave you autonomy over Crossgate's biosecurity program so we could bypass Parliament. I did not give you permission to bypass me." His eyes flicked toward the mirror, then back to me. "Pull the interview tape," I said. "I want every technician we have working on this rumor of yours." "Already have, sir." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Look just below the chin." He tapped the screen, then turned it toward me. It showed a close image of Petrovy's face from the interview. His wrinkled skin was pale and sweaty. His mouth was open mid-screen. The image was blurred slightly, but not enough to hide what Nicholas wanted me to see. There, just below Petrovy's jaw, were two thin red marks. They looked like dots, small punctures, elongated, almost like tiny red slits in the skin. They were familiar, too familiar. The moment I saw them, something old and buried twisted in my stomach. Nicholas zoomed in. "Lead analyst thinks it may be a new strain of liquid hallucinogen. Something injected. The kind that changes the subject and allows whoever delivered it to guide or command them." I kept staring at the two marks. The dots seemed to stare back. For a moment, time stretched. The bathroom, the steam, Nicholas, the building around us, all of it seemed to slow down and pull away. I was no longer a senior officer in a government building. I was a boy again, standing in the doorway of a house that never recovered from one summer afternoon. Nicholas's phone rang. The sound snapped me back. He glanced down at it. "Time for Claire's medication," he said lightly, dismissing the alarm. "I will keep you posted as soon as the technicians know more. And you may want to turn the tap off." "Sir," he moved toward the door. Only then did I notice that the water was still running. The basin had filled and overflowed. Warm water spilled over the edge and ran across the counter, dripping onto the floor. I turned the tap off. By the time I looked back, Nicholas was gone. The bathroom door swung shut behind him. The mirrors had fogged over from the steam. Only a patchy corner remained clear. The room was empty and echoing. The high humidity, the white fog on the glass, and the sound of water dripping onto tile gave me a sudden strange focus. It was the kind of sharp attention that had saved me more than once in urgent matters. Everything unnecessary fell away. Where had I seen those marks before? Then it came to me. Claire. She had been sick in one way or another since the summer our father disappeared. He had been ill by then. His face and legs had turned pale and weak from multiple sclerosis. He could no longer move around the house without help. Some days he could not leave his bed. Claire took care of him more often than she should have, because Mother could not bear the sight of him wasting away, and I was away at school most of the time. That summer, Mother took me to visit another boarding school. I had begged her not to. I had told her I did not want to go. I had told her Claire should not be left alone with Father for so long. Mother ignored me. She always did when she had already decided something. When we returned home, Claire was in the front room, screaming, not crying. Screaming. Her face was red. Her voice was almost gone. She was on the floor, curled into herself, clutching her calf while blood ran between her fingers. There were 2 puncture marks on her leg. She kept screaming about a big black bird, over and over. A big black bird. A big black bird took him. The police suspected a burglary gone wrong, though nothing had been taken. Nothing was missing from the house except my father. Mother had another theory. In her grief and shame, she decided Father had been pretending to be sick. She said he had created an elaborate scene so he could run away with the neighbor, a much younger woman who disappeared the same day. No one believed her, but no one had a better answer. Claire was sent to therapy, then more therapy, then different doctors. Nothing helped. She kept seeing things. She forgot her medication. She screamed in her sleep. She said something had been in the room. She said it was not a man and not a bird, but both. She said it smelled like wet feathers and old blood. As the years passed, everyone learned to call it trauma. It was easier that way. I was still staring at the fogged mirror when the bathroom door opened again. Quite the sauna you're running, the director boomed as he stepped inside. I flinched and quickly wiped at the mirror with my handkerchief. "Sorry, sir," I said. "I'll clear it up." The director stood behind me. I could feel him there, large and steady and impossible to ignore. "Petrovi has just passed away," he said. "Bacterial infection." I froze. My hand stopped moving on the mirror. I looked into the patch of glass I had just cleared. My own face stared back at me, pale and shocked. Behind me, the bathroom door was visible. The sinks, the wall, the cloudy lights above. But not the director. He was standing right behind me. I had heard him. I could feel his presence. Yet the mirror reflected only the room and me. No director. My breath caught in my throat. "Sir," I whispered. "Ah, you do not think." His voice came from behind me, smooth and almost pleased. "Good riddance," I say. "This marks a new beginning in British-Serbian relations, don't you think?" I did not answer. I ran. I had never run so fast out of a bathroom in my life. In fact, I do not think I had ever run so fast anywhere. I burst into the corridor and kept going, not knowing where I was headed. My shoes slipped slightly on the polished floor. Someone shouted after me. I ignored them. My mind was not working properly. It jumped from thought to thought, trying to make sense of what I had seen. No reflection. Petrovi's puncture marks. Claire's puncture marks. Nicholas, Crossgate, the director. A black bird. I turned a corner too quickly and crashed into someone near the office printer. Papers flew into the air around us like white birds. The woman I had hit fell backward with a loud cry. "Are you blind as a bat?" She snapped from the floor. "What is going on?" I crouched to help her, barely aware of what I was doing. Papers floated down around us. One landed on my shoulder. Another stuck to the side of the printer. "Apologies," I said quickly. "Margaret, from counterintelligence, isn't it? There is a very good explanation for this, though I am going to sound completely mad." She looked up at me angrily. That was when I saw them. Just under her left eye, almost hidden by the harsh fluorescent light, were two faint red marks. 2 dots. My body reacted before my mind did. I pushed myself backward across the floor, my hands slipping on the papers. Margaret stared at me. "What is wrong with you?" Behind her, the printer's dark acrylic surface reflected the room in a dull, warped way. I saw myself. I saw the papers. I saw the edge of the desk. But I did not see Margaret. Or rather, I saw only the space where she should have been. My stomach dropped. I scrambled to my feet and ran again. By the time I made it through the security turnstiles and out of the building, my chest was burning. I bent forward on the pavement, hands on my knees, trying to breathe. People walked around me without stopping. London traffic rolled by in its usual gray river of noise and fumes. My mind was racing faster than my body ever could. It had to be Nicholas. It had to be some trick, some chemical, some kind of psychedelic aerosol he had released during our meeting in the bathroom. He had worked on Crossgate's biosecurity program. He had access to things I did not fully understand. Maybe he had drugged me. Maybe he was trying to make me look mad now that his little mutiny had gone wrong. Yes, that made sense. That was better than the other possibility. I hailed a black cab and gave the driver Claire and Nicholas's address. During the ride, I kept one hand in the pocket of my trench coat. My fingers closed around the folding knife hidden there. It was not standard issue, and it was not exactly allowed. The blade was tipped with African blackwood, made partly to avoid metal detectors. A little insurance, I had always called it. At that moment, all I could think about was driving it straight into Nicholas's heart. The cab dropped me near their house. I did not go to the front door. Instead, I moved around the side and slipped through the back. The house was quiet, too quiet. I crept into the living room. Then I stopped. Claire was lying in the middle of the room, not on a sofa, not in bed. She was on a makeshift operating table. At first, my brain refused to accept what I was seeing. The table had been built from pieces of furniture pushed together and covered with white sheets. Tubes ran from Claire's arms and legs. Catheters and IV bags hung from stands placed around her body in a messy, careless way. Some of the tubes seemed to lead into her calves. Others disappeared beneath the sheet. She looked asleep. No, not asleep. Sedated, her face was calm in a way that frightened me. She looked peaceful, almost happy, as though someone had smoothed away every worry she had carried since childhood. "Medication? My arse," I whispered. I rushed toward her. Before I reached the table, something pricked the back of my neck. I cried out. It was sharp and deep, and it dug farther into the scruff of my neck as if it had a life of its own. My body stiffened. Heat and cold rushed through me at the same time. Nicholas's voice came from behind me. "The thing about aging," he whispered, "is that one begins to taste everything." I tried to turn, but my legs almost gave way. He moved into view slowly. He was not using crutches. His limp was gone. His trembling had stopped. His pale skin now had a bright, healthy shine, like a man who had just returned from a holiday in the sun. His cheeks were full. His eyes were clear. He looked younger than he had that morning, stronger too. "I could taste the cholesterol in Petrovi," Nicholas said with disgust. "It ruined the entire experience. Old man just would not turn properly. No, I needed something pure." He looked toward Claire. "And what is purer than the flesh and blood of your own brood?" My hands shook. My thoughts came slowly, like they had to push through mud. "You," I mumbled. "What did you do?" Nicholas smiled. "I always knew you were special," he said. "Your family line had the right old smell to it. Serbian folklore calls it blood bonds. Blood bonds are thicker than water, they say. That is what keeps our kind young. That is what keeps our kind loyal. Only the young go to great lengths to please their regnant, in war and in love." I did not fully understand him. Not then. Maybe not even now. All I knew was that Claire was lying on a table, my neck was bleeding, and Nicholas was no longer pretending to be human badly enough for me to ignore it. But I forced the words out. "No, you disappeared," he tilted his head. "Your father?" "Yes, a poor meal, honestly, sick flesh. Weak blood, but necessary. The first step is always messy." My stomach turned, the big black bird. Claire screaming, the marks on her calf. Nicholas leaned closer, his smile widened. "Our clan's global influence will soon surpass those wretched reptilians," he said. "And all thanks to your crossgate, my dear boy. You built the door. We simply walked through it. My fingers found the knife in my pocket. After that, everything happened in broken pieces. I remember pulling the blade free. I remember turning and thrusting it upward with every bit of strength I had left. I remember the blackwood tip entering something that felt too hard and too soft at the same time." Nicholas screamed. It was not a human scream. The lights in the room burst bright, then dim, then bright again. A wind seemed to explode from nowhere, filling the room with the sound of wings. Papers lifted from tables. Curtains snapped. Glass cracked somewhere behind me. For a second, I saw Nicholas's face change. Not completely, not in a clean way. It flickered, like a bad signal. Pale skin pulled tight. The mouth widened. The eyes became too dark. Something like feathers rose from his shoulders and neck. His arms bent backward and outward as though they were remembering an older shape. Then there was a huge black form above me. A bird. A man. A shadow with wings. Claire screamed from the table, though I do not know if she was awake. I remember falling. I remember blood running down my neck. I remember Claire dragging tubes from her body and stumbling across the room. I remember her driving me to A&E while I cried like a child in the passenger seat. By the time we reached the hospital, I was bawling uncontrollably. I could not stop screaming about a big black bird. Blood ran freely from 2 puncture marks on the back of my neck. The director visited later that evening. I was restrained in the hospital bed. That detail still bothers me, even if I understand why they did it. I had been shouting, struggling, trying to warn everyone. Nurses do not react well when a government official covered in blood screams that his brother-in-law is an ancient bird creature working inside British intelligence. Still, I was careful. When the director entered the room, I made sure to check the small mirror beside my bed. His reflection was there, I let out a deep breath of relief when I saw his stern but soft features in the glass. There he was, exactly as he should have been. Older, tired, serious, human. He looked at me with concern. So did Claire. She looked healthier than I had seen her in years. Her face had color. Her eyes were clear. Her hands no longer shook. She told me she was worried sick about Nicholas. She said he had disappeared. The cameras at work had never captured him leaving the building. Neither she nor the director believed my version of what happened. I could see it in their eyes. Pity, confusion, fear of my mind, not fear of Nicholas. They thought I had broken under pressure. They thought old family trauma had returned. They thought I had seen Petrovi on the news, remembered Claire's childhood story, and built a nightmare around my own guilt. I told them about the marks. I told them about the mirrors. I told them about Margaret. I told them about Nicholas standing without crutches. I told them about Claire on the table. I told them about the wings. They listened, but they did not believe. The director said I needed rest. Claire held my hand and cried. A doctor mentioned medication in a soft voice, as if I were too fragile to hear the word clearly. But I know what I saw. I know Petrovi was not mad. I know my father did not run away with the neighbor. I know Nicholas did not disappear from work because he was hiding like an ordinary man. And I know the agency has been sick for longer than anyone wants to admit. They think they can keep me quiet. They think restraints, doctors, and kind voices will turn my story into another illness in the family. They think this will pass. But I am telling you, when the evidence is clear, I will have a nice story for you both. Story 2. My father bought cemetery plots for my whole family all at once. He never explained why he did it, and he never explained how he had the money for it. We were never rich. We were not even close to rich. Buying one cemetery plot is already expensive. Buying several at the same time is the kind of thing a family like ours would normally have to plan for years. But somehow, my father did it. When I say he bought plots for all of us, I should explain something. At first, that did not include me. That is how I know I was probably an accident. I was the fourth child in my family, born 5 years after my older sister. My parents already had their children planned out before I arrived. Or at least that is how it always felt. Maybe my father did not want me to be left out forever. Maybe he felt guilty. Maybe there was some other reason I will never understand. But years later, with money I still do not know where he got, he bought a cemetery plot for me too. The problem was that too much time had passed. My siblings' plots were all together with my parents' plots. They had been bought more than 10 years earlier. By the time my father bought mine, there were no empty spaces left near them. So I was placed away from the rest of my family. I could not really complain. My plot was not ugly. In fact, it was almost beautiful. It sat near the top of a small hill in the cemetery. Not a huge hill, but high enough to give a wide view of the graveyard below. From there, you could see rows of granite stones, statues, crosses, and carved angels spreading out toward the edges of the cemetery. Behind them, the sky always seemed larger than it did anywhere else. My plot sat beneath a mulberry tree that gave fruit every summer. I do not know much about trees or plants, but someone once told me that the kind of mulberry tree beside my future grave could live for hundreds of years. Some of them can reach more than 500 years old. Imagine that. Imagine being buried next to something already older than you. Something that will stay older than you until you cannot become any older at all. Then, after you are gone and your name has been carved into stone, that tree will keep living. It will keep growing. It will keep dropping fruit every summer. People will come and go. Graves will fill. Families will cry. Grass will grow and be cut again. The world will change. And that tree will still be there. Most people have to search for dread. It is not an emotion that appears easily by accident. You have to think about things for dread to grow. You have to understand time, death, loss, and how little control you really have. For many people, dread comes from purpose. They find it because they look for it. Not for me. Since I was old enough to understand what dread was, I have felt it every time I thought about that mulberry tree. I hated it. Not in a loud way, not in a way that made sense, but I hated it with a quiet, heavy bitterness. It stood over my empty grave like it was waiting for me, like it had been waiting before I was born and would keep waiting long after I was gone. Sometimes I visited my plot. I know that sounds strange. Most people do not visit the place where they will be buried before they die. But I did. I went there from time to time and stood near that empty square of grass. It was a place filled with nothing but the promise of death at some point in the future. The area around my family's resting place had filled in over the years, because many people can die in 10 years. But my plot still looked fresh and untouched. Nothing marked it. Nothing decorated it. Only that cursed tree stood over it. There was a bench nearby. It was not exactly on the hill, but close enough to see my plot clearly. I think the bench belonged to a larger grave area for a family much richer than mine, but I never paid attention to their names. I never cared about any grave in that cemetery except my own. The bench gave me a place to sit and look at where I would one day lie. Sometimes I ate there. Sometimes I read. Sometimes I listened to music. Most of the time I simply sat there and thought about my life. Usually, I was alone. Not many people visit cemeteries in the early afternoon, and even fewer visit the sections where there are not many filled graves. So I would sit by myself under the pale daylight, staring at that empty plot while the shadow of the mulberry tree stretched over it. I was usually alone. That changed on my last visit. When I came to the hill that day, I saw a man standing by the mulberry tree. He was leaning against it, staring absent-mindedly at the bench where I normally sat. He looked strange, very strange. His face was thin and hollow in most places. His body seemed to be made of nothing but skin and bone, and the skin was stretched so tightly over that bone that I could not tell if his pale pinkish-white color came from the sunlight or from his skeleton showing through. He wore black from head to toe, so much black that it was difficult to tell where one piece of clothing ended and another began. I think he was wearing a black sport coat, buttoned just below his chest. Under it, he had a black dress shirt with only enough texture to separate it from the jacket if you looked closely. His pants were black too, straight and smooth, with no wrinkles or creases. On his feet were black ballroom shoes with no laces, dull and flat, almost without shine. Any smaller details disappeared into the darkness of his outfit. He stood there without blinking, without breathing, without moving. He only stared at the bench. His eyes were hard to follow. They were too light, either from age or some deep sickness. But the way his body was positioned made it clear what he was looking at. I looked at the bench, trying to see if anything was wrong with it. There was nothing there. No object, no note, no mark, nothing that explained why he was staring with such focus. Then I looked back at him. I blinked. When my eyes opened again, his eyes were on mine. His irises were milky white, but his pupils were black. Not just dark, black in a way that seemed endless. Black like the rest of them. Black like something that did not reflect light, but swallowed it. For a moment, I felt as if the ground had dropped out from under me. I felt like I was falling into those pupils. I do not think I have ever felt anything like it in all my life. Do you think your recent dreams might be connected to the feeling of being separated from the rest of your family? The voice was calm and professional. Suddenly, I was not at the cemetery. I was sitting in my therapist's office. He sat across from me in his comfortable chair with a notebook in his hand. I was sitting in the chair opposite him, trying to say something, but no words came out right. "What?" I asked, confused. I was not sure where I was. I mean, I knew where I was, but a second before, I had been somewhere else. The moment I was lost in did not belong to that office. Well, my therapist said, being the only family member separated in that way, especially with something as final as a grave, could naturally create a sense of isolation. When we also consider some of the other incidents you have talked about in past sessions, it makes sense that these feelings might show up in your dreams. He adjusted his glasses halfway through his little speech. "Right," I said slowly. "Yes, my dreams. I guess that makes sense." I rubbed the back of my neck. It was uncomfortable, and I am sure he noticed. Therapists always notice those things, even when you do them without thinking. "Our time is almost up," he said. "I will do a little more research, and next week we can talk more about what these dreams may mean." He checked his phone beside him. There was no clock in the room, but for some reason, I trusted that he knew the time. "That sounds good," I said. I started to stand, brushing imaginary dust off my pants just to give my hands something to do. "Michael?" I looked at him. He tilted his head and widened his eyes slightly. "Are you doing all right? You have seemed distracted during the last few sessions." "Yeah," I said. "You're probably right. Sorry, with the redundancy and everything, I've been scattered, looking for work and all that." I kept patting my clothes as I lied. "Well, if you can, make sure you take care of yourself," he said. "Write down any other dreams you have before next week. And remember, the 3 T's." He pointed at me in that teacher-like way people use when they expect you to say the answer. "Think, thought, think," I replied. That phrase had never made sense to me, but he had repeated it so many times that it had burned itself into my memory. Whether I understood it or not, I knew I would not forget it. I still do not know if the man at the cemetery was a dream. I remember seeing him. I remember his black eyes staring into mine. Then I was home. I do not remember how I got there. At the same time, it was not a blank space in my mind. I knew time had passed. I had a faint memory of the trip back, something about turning around, getting on the bus, and going home. But I did not feel as if I had lived those moments. It felt like I had skipped over them and landed back inside my life after they were already finished. That kind of thing had happened to me before. A few times in my life, I have come back to myself minutes or hours after something happened. I would have memories of how I got there, but I would not remember experiencing them consciously. It was like watching a recording from outside my own body. One time, it happened when my grandmother died. I remember being beside her hospital bed. I remember the beeping of the heart monitor filling the room, steady and annoying. The sound bounced around inside my head as if it had nowhere else to go. Then, suddenly, I was sitting outside the room. My mother was crying. I knew my grandmother had died. I remembered it happening. But I did not remember being there for the moment itself. Another time, I remember sticking my hand into a boiling pot. No, that is not exactly right. I remember being about to stick my hand into the boiling water. Then I was in the hospital, with my arm being wrapped and treated. I remembered the pain, but not the act. I remembered watching it as if I were standing somewhere outside myself. I did not even remember why I had done it. And now there was the man in black. I remembered seeing him at the tree. I remembered him seeing me. Then I was home. Somewhere in my head there was a vague memory of leaving the cemetery and taking the bus back, but it did not feel like mine. It felt like I had only watched those moments until I was allowed back into my own body. I sat in my apartment for hours after that therapy session, feeling uneasy around the shadows. It was not that the shadows had changed. They were not moving. They were not growing or stretching in strange ways. They were not doing anything that I could point to. But for the first time, I felt aware of them. Truly aware. I do not think I had ever really looked into a shadow before, not as a thing by itself. Usually, a shadow is just a lack of light. It is something that blocks the view or hides what is behind it. But that day, I looked into one as if it were an object, as if it had shape and purpose. It unnerved me. I felt like the shadow was looking back. I could not see eyes, but I could feel them. There was a burning attention inside the darkness, the same kind of curiosity I had when I looked at it. I did not return to the cemetery for some time after that. I told myself the encounter had been a dream. I told myself it was only an image my mind had created because I had been thinking too much about my grave and my family. Once I told myself that, I felt a strange kind of safety. If it had been a dream, then there was no reason to go back. No reason to test it. No reason to see if the man was real. The truth was, I think I was afraid of him. Some part of me knew it. I did not know what I would do if I went back and saw him again. If I could not call it a dream, then how would I explain it? How would I live with it? So I stayed away. The next session with my therapist came. "Have you had any more dreams since last week?" he asked. His face was open and curious. "Yeah," I said. "I think so." Yes, I scratched my face as a dull ache formed deep in my jaw. "Would you like to share them, Michael?" He sat straighter, looking more interested than before. "I don't remember them," I said, looking away. "You don't remember them?" "Yeah, how do you know you dreamed if you do not remember them?" He leaned back in his chair, and I could tell he thought there was something meaningful in my answer. "I remember having them," I said. "I just don't remember what they were. I remember the time passing while I was asleep. That usually only happens when I dream. When I don't dream, I just close my eyes and open them. And it's morning." I looked into his eyes while I spoke, trying to place the words in the right order. "Interesting," he said. Then he wrote something down. The scratching of his pen created a silence between us. My mind moved too quickly to accept silence. My eyes started wandering around the room, looking for something to focus on. They stopped on the ashtray sitting on the table between us. Why do people do that? I asked. The question came out almost without effort, like I had breathed it instead of spoken it. "Do what?" he asked, looking up from his notes. "Smoke." His expression changed slightly. Why wouldn't they? It was such a therapist answer. A question answering a question. I knew I had opened a door, and I was not sure he would let me close it. "It's bad for you," I said. "Doesn't every cigarette take about 10 minutes off your life? Isn't that what life is?" he asked. "Dictation in a way?" I frowned. "It shortens your life," he continued, "but it is also one of the few things that gives you an active choice in that lifespan." "So what?" I asked. "Smoking is life?" "Choices are life," he said. "Smoking is a choice. So is jumping off a cliff. I don't think that makes it life. You can only do it while you are alive," he said. "So why would it not be?" I narrowed my eyes at him. I did not like the way that sounded. I did not like the way it made a kind of sense while still being wrong. Then he changed the subject. "Have you been back to your plot since the dream?" He adjusted his tie as he asked. I looked at the ashtray again. "If I leave early, am I still billed for the full session?" I asked. I patted my knees and sat stiffly in the chair. I never liked lying back in the therapy chair. It made me feel too exposed. "Your insurance will be," he said. For the first time, I saw confusion on his face. "Good," I said. "It's severance anyway." Then I stood and walked toward the door. "I'll see you next week." He called after me. I did not reply. After leaving his office, I wandered for hours. I did not want to go home, but home was the only place I knew how to reach without thinking. I only knew bus routes to familiar places at familiar times. My schedule had been disrupted too much by leaving early. My habits no longer felt trustworthy. Eventually, I got onto a bus. I do not remember the number. I am not sure I even looked at it. The action felt normal enough that I did it without thinking. I sat near the front, where I usually sat, and let the city pass by outside the windows. I do not know how long I was on the bus before I realized it had stopped. When I looked up, no one else was there. The bus was empty. Not just empty of passengers, empty of the driver too. The air inside was damp and smelled faintly of old rot. The engine was silent. Usually the engine noise was loud, especially near the front, but there was nothing. No hum, no vibration, no voices, no traffic outside. I stood and walked to the door. It opened without a sound. I stepped off, confused but not surprised, which frightened me later. At the time, I did not question it. I only raised my head and saw where I was. I was at the beginning of the trail that led into the cemetery where my plot waited. It felt as if the choices had already been made for me. My body started walking before I clearly decided to move. The cemetery was made of many split paths. Somehow, despite all normal logic, those paths formed a rough grid that separated the different sections of graves. It should have been easy to get lost in, but I knew my route too well. My path was memorized through a system of lefts and rights. The first 3 turns passed the graves of an old historical figure from my city. Left, right, left. The next several turns curved around a cathedral complex in the middle of the cemetery. If I remember correctly, the cathedral was younger than the cemetery itself. The graves had slowly surrounded it over time, like the dead had claimed it. I did not consciously remember all those turns, but my body did. I had walked the path too many times. In the final section, there were 5 turns, or maybe 6. At the center of the 6th was the hill. To my right was another empty plot. To my left was the bench. Ahead of me was the mulberry tree. And there, leaning against it, was the man in black. This time, he was looking straight at me. He seemed more real than before, more filled in. I could see him breathing. I could see the small rise and fall of his body. I was not dreaming. I was not watching myself from far away. I was there. I was experiencing it. I did not turn around. My steps were slow as I walked toward the center of the hill. Each movement felt measured. The closer I got, the worse the smell became. He smelled like rotting meat. His breath was worse. It burned in my lungs like acid. The closer I came, the harder it was to breathe. The air around him felt dead, as if nothing living could pass through it without being damaged. Still, I moved toward him. When I stopped in front of him, his gaze pierced through me. "Hello?" I said. His tight skin pulled his lips into something almost like a smile. He did not answer with words, but I knew he had heard me. "Who are you?" I asked. His smile disappeared. He tilted his head. "Who?" he asked. "Your name," I said. He moved toward me. I stepped back too quickly, lost my balance, and fell onto my backside. I slid down part of the hill, but he kept moving as if nothing about my fall mattered. He did not move like a human being. His pale head moved first, and the dark shape of his body followed behind it. It seemed as though the air died after he passed through it. By the time he leaned over me, bent in a strange, mocking bow, there was no wind at all. "Ask specifically," he said. "Do you wish for my head, or what follows?" His expression twisted into something unreadable. "Your name," I repeated. This time, it was not a question. It was a demand. He raised his right hand and made an L shape with it. He placed his thumb against his chin and pointed his forefinger upward, resting it against the tip of his nose. "My head is named Death," he said. Then he turned his finger downward on the axis of his thumb until it pointed toward his chest. "What follows is called Hades," he continued. "I am my own rider and my own follower. Do you wish to meet both?" His head tilted unnaturally in the other direction as he looked down at me. I sat there in stunned silence. I could not move. I could not answer. He watched me breathe. He watched me crawl inside my own skin. After a while, he raised both arms and crossed them into an X. His left arm pointed toward my right side, and his right arm pointed toward my left. "Life is choices," he said. "For you are still alive. A choice." I stared into his black pupils. And then I was somewhere else. "Have you had dreams since our last session?" my therapist asked. He was sitting in his chair again. He looked a little out of breath, as if he had been running because he was late. "No," I said. The word came out flat and certain. "Ah," he said. "Any other updates? I know our last session ended abruptly. I was worried you might not come back. Have you been to your plot since then?" He tilted his head as he asked. I looked at the ashtray between us. "I don't think I'll be going back there," I said. "Not for a long time. Hopefully." My therapist studied me for a moment. He waited for me to say more, but I did not. The room felt smaller than it had before. The shadows in the corners seemed deeper. The ashtray sat on the table like an object from another life. I wondered how many people had sat in this room and talked about their fears while something else listened from the dark spaces around them. "Why do you say hopefully?" he asked. I did not answer right away, because I knew it was a lie. I would go back there one day. I had always known that. Maybe not by choice. Maybe not while I was alive. But I would return to that hill. I would return to that empty plot beneath the mulberry tree. My family would be somewhere else, together in the ground, and I would be under that tree alone. Unless the man in black was waiting for me before then. Unless he had always been waiting. I looked at my therapist and tried to think of something ordinary to say. Instead, I thought of the man's words. Life is choices, for you are still alive, a choice. And for the first time in my life, I wondered if being alive was not something I had been given, but something I was still being asked to decide. Story 3. It was one of those nights where sleep felt impossible. I had already spent hours lying in bed, staring at my phone while the rest of the house stayed quiet and dark around me. The blue-white light from the screen shone across my face as my thumbs moved lazily through one app after another. Short videos, old messages, random posts, comments from people I did not know, pictures I did not care about. I was not even interested anymore. I was only scrolling because I had nothing else to do and because my brain refused to shut off. It was a normal thing for me. I had always struggled with sleep, especially on school nights when I knew I needed rest the most. The more I told myself to sleep, the more awake I became. My thoughts would not stop moving. Sometimes I thought about school. Sometimes I thought about friends, grades, drama, crushes, my future, or stupid conversations from 3 years ago that my brain suddenly decided to replay at 2 in the morning. That night was no different at first. It felt like another normal episode of insomnia. Another long night where I would finally fall asleep just before the sun came up and wake up feeling like a zombie. At least, that was what I believed. Then I heard the sound that changed everything. Before I explain what happened, I should probably tell you who I am. My name is Brianna, and I am just an ordinary high school girl. I am not special. I am not someone who usually gets involved in strange things. My life before that night was boring in the way most teenage lives are boring. I went to school, came home, did homework when I could force myself to do it, texted my friends, worried about small things that felt huge, and tried to survive the normal mess of being a teenager. My family had always seemed normal too. I grew up in a house that felt safe. My mom was a devoted Christian. She prayed every day, went to church whenever she could, and always had a Bible near her bed. She listened to worship music when she cooked, kept little framed verses around the house, and talked about faith like it was the center of her life. My dad believed too, though he was not as intense about it as my mom. He went to church with us, bowed his head when we prayed, and respected everything my mom believed, but he was quieter about it. I also have a little brother. He is younger than me and annoying in the way little brothers usually are. He steals snacks, leaves video game controllers everywhere, and asks questions at the worst possible times. But I love him. I always thought our home was the kind of place where nothing truly terrible could happen. There were crosses on the walls, pictures of Jesus in the hallway, and my mom always saying things like, "God protects this house." I believed her. That night destroyed that belief. It was around 3 in the morning. I remember checking the time because I was frustrated with myself. For the past 4 nights, I had not been able to fall asleep before 5 in the morning. It had become a pattern. I would lie awake until my eyes finally got heavy near sunrise, sleep for a couple of hours, then drag myself through the day like I was only half alive. I knew I probably had at least 2 more hours before sleep would come. But I was tired of looking at my phone. My eyes hurt, my head felt heavy, and nothing on the screen was interesting anymore. So I finally locked my phone, put it beside my pillow, and turned onto my side. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and closed my eyes. I told myself to breathe slowly. I told myself not to think. I told myself that even resting with my eyes closed was better than nothing. Then I heard footsteps outside my bedroom door. My eyes opened immediately, At first, I did not move. I stayed perfectly still, listening. The hallway outside my room was dark, but I could see the thin line of shadow under my door. The house was usually quiet at night except for the soft hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the occasional creak of old wood. These footsteps were different. They were soft, but clear. For a few seconds, I told myself it was my mom. She often got up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. That was normal. I had heard her walking down the hallway many times before. I forced myself to relax and closed my eyes again. But then the footsteps did not stop. They moved past my door, paused, then continued. A few seconds later, I heard another set of footsteps. These were heavier, slower, more deliberate. My dad, I thought. That should have made me feel better, but it did not. A small, uneasy thought slipped into my mind. What would both of my parents be doing awake at 3 in the morning? I tried to ignore it. People wake up at night. Parents do things without explaining them to their kids. Maybe my mom had felt sick. Maybe my dad got up to check on her. Maybe they heard a noise and were looking around. There were 100 normal reasons, and I tried to hold on to those reasons as tightly as I could. Then I heard the front door creak open. My whole body went cold. I knew that sound. Our front door had an old hinge that made a low, tired groan no matter how slowly you opened it. I had heard it 1,000 times during the day. Hearing it at 3 in the morning felt wrong in a way I cannot fully explain. My first thought was that someone had broken into the house. The footsteps I had thought belonged to my parents might have belonged to strangers. Maybe there were intruders inside. Maybe they had already gone into my parents' room. Maybe they were moving through the house quietly, taking whatever they could find. My mind filled with awful images all at once. A gloved hand on my doorknob. A shadow standing over my brother's bed. My parents tied up downstairs. A knife. A gun. Blood. I wanted to get up. I wanted to call someone. I wanted to run to my brother's room and lock the door. But fear held me down like a heavy weight. I could not move. I could barely breathe. I lay there in the dark, listening. For a while, all I heard were small sounds from downstairs. It sounded like things being moved around, a drawer opening, something sliding across a table, a soft scrape, a quiet thump. These sounds made me believe even more that strangers were inside the house. They were searching through our things. They were taking whatever they wanted. But then I heard my mother's voice. It was faint, but I knew it was her. That confused me more than anything. If there were intruders, why was my mom talking? Why was she not screaming? Why was my dad not shouting? Why had no one called the police? Her voice did not sound afraid. I could not make out the words, but the tone was calm, almost focused. More thoughts began racing through my mind. Maybe my parents had invited someone over. But who invites people over at 3 in the morning? Maybe there had been an emergency. But then, why was everything so quiet? Maybe my mom was praying. But why was the front door open? Why were there other footsteps? 30 minutes passed. I know because I kept checking the time on my phone with shaking hands. Each minute felt longer than the last. I stayed in bed, frozen, staring at my door and listening to the strange noises from downstairs. Sometimes I heard murmuring. Sometimes I heard objects being moved. Once, I thought I heard my father's voice, but it was too low to be sure. After almost an hour, I could not take it anymore. The fear had been eating me alive. I needed answers. I could not keep lying there imagining every horrible possibility. Part of me wanted to stay hidden until morning and pretend I had heard nothing. Another part of me knew that if something bad was happening, especially if my brother was in danger, I could not just stay in bed. I slowly pushed the blanket off me and sat up. My room felt colder than usual. The darkness seemed thicker. I reached for my phone, but I did not turn on the flashlight. I was too scared that the light would show under my door and warn whoever was outside that I was awake. Instead, I kept the phone in my hand and stepped carefully toward the door. The floor creaked under my foot, and I froze. No sound came from the hallway. I took another step. Then, another. When I reached the door, I placed my hand on the knob. The metal was cold, so cold it made a shiver run through me. My heart was pounding so loudly that I was afraid someone outside the room would hear it. I stood there for a moment, trying to force myself to breathe. Then, slowly, I pressed the handle down. The latch clicked softly. I winced. Nothing happened. I opened the door, just a crack. At first, the hallway looked empty. The bathroom door was closed. My brother's bedroom door was shut. My parents' door was open. That alone made my stomach drop. They never slept with their door open. From downstairs, the sounds became clearer. It was not rummaging anymore. It was chanting. Low voices moved together in a rhythm that made the air feel heavy. The words were not English. I could not understand them at all. They rose and fell in a pattern, repeating again and again, like a song without music. The sound crawled through the hallway and wrapped around me. I stepped out of my room. The floor felt cold under my feet. I moved slowly, keeping one hand on the wall to steady myself. Every part of me wanted to turn around and go back to my bed, but my body kept moving forward. The chanting grew louder as I reached the top of the stairs. The house below was not completely dark. A strange orange glow flickered from the living room. Candles, dozens of them. Their light moved across the walls and ceiling, making the shadows twist and stretch. The pictures of Jesus and the crosses on the walls looked different in that light. Not comforting, not holy. Just still and silent, watching, I made my way down the stairs, one careful step at a time. I knew every creak in that staircase, so I avoided the loud spots. My hands were shaking so badly that I had to grip the railing. The chanting continued, steady and deep. At the bottom of the stairs, a thin, translucent curtain separated the hallway from the living room. My mom had put it there months earlier because she said it made the entrance look nicer. I had never cared about it before. Now it was the only thing between me and whatever was happening inside my home. I stood behind it and looked through the thin fabric. The shapes beyond it were blurry, but I could see movement. People stood in a circle. Candle flames flickered around them. The room looked nothing like the living room where I watched TV with my family, where my brother played games, where my mom folded laundry and talked to me about school. It looked like a place from a nightmare. With trembling fingers, I moved the curtain aside. What I saw will stay with me forever. There were 4 people in the living room. Maybe more were hidden in the shadows, but I saw 4 clearly. They wore black robes with hoods that covered most of their faces. Only parts of their faces showed under the fabric. Their mouths, their chins, small pieces of skin lit by candlelight. Each of them held a candle. They stood around a symbol drawn on the floor. It looked demonic. I do not know how else to describe it. It was large and made of lines and circles, with strange shapes I had never seen before. It looked like something a cult would use in a movie, except this was not a movie. It was in my living room, on the floor where my brother and I used to sit when we were kids. The symbol was red. At first, I thought it was blood. My knees almost gave out when that thought hit me. But when I looked closer, I saw small grains scattered along the lines. Rice. It looked like rice, but it was stained dark red. Red rice. The chanting continued. Then one of the robed figures turned slightly, and the candlelight touched her face. It was my mother. I recognized her immediately. Even with half of her face hidden, I knew the shape of her mouth, the curve of her chin, the way she stood. My mom was there, wearing a black robe, holding a candle, chanting in a language I did not understand. My mind refused to accept it. No, I thought. No. Then the figure beside her turned too. My father. A cold emptiness opened inside my chest. My parents. My Christian mother. My calm, normal father. The people who had raised me, protected me, prayed over me when I was sick, told me right from wrong, and filled our house with crosses and Bible verses. They were standing in our living room in black robes, chanting around a red symbol in the middle of the floor. I wanted to run back to my room. I wanted to pretend I had never seen it. But my legs stopped working. It felt like something had grabbed me from behind and locked me in place. Not hands exactly, more like pressure around my whole body. My feet would not move. My knees shook, but I could not step back. I could not even lower the curtain. For one terrible moment, I thought something in that room wanted them to see me. Something unseen. Something standing between the candles. Something that had noticed me before my parents did. The chanting grew louder. My mother's mouth moved faster. My father lifted his candle higher. I tried to move. I tried with everything I had. My body felt numb, but panic burned through me. I forced my toes to curl against the floor. I forced my fingers to let go of the curtain. I forced myself to take one step back. The moment I broke free, I ran. I ran up the stairs faster than I thought possible. Behind me, the chanting suddenly rose into a loud, furious sound. It was as if every voice in the living room had followed me. The strange words crashed against the walls, filling the house. By the time I reached my room and slammed the door shut, I could still hear them clearly. I locked my door and pushed my desk in front of it with shaking arms. Then, suddenly, the chanting stopped. The silence after it was worse. I stood in my room, breathing hard, listening for footsteps. I thought about my brother. My little brother was still in his room. Had he heard anything? Was he asleep? Was he part of it? No, I could not believe that. He was just a kid. He had to be safe. He had to be. I wanted to go to him, but I could not make myself open the door again. I did not sleep at all that night. I sat on my bed with my back against the wall, my phone in my hand, and my eyes locked on the door. Every time the house creaked, I flinched. Every time the wind brushed against the window, I thought someone was outside. I kept waiting for my parents to knock. I kept waiting for them to call my name in that normal, sweet voice they used when they wanted me to come downstairs. But no one came. When the sun finally rose, I was still awake. Morning light slipped through my curtains, soft and pale, but it did not make me feel safe. It only made everything more confusing. The house began to sound normal again. Pipes moved in the walls. A car drove by outside. Birds made noise in the trees. Somewhere downstairs, a cabinet opened. My family woke up at their usual times. That was almost more terrifying than the ritual. My dad showered. My mom moved around the kitchen. My brother complained about something in his room. Everything sounded normal. Too normal. Like last night had never happened. I sat in my room, still trying to understand what I had seen. Questions kept spinning through my head. Were those really my parents? How could they be involved in something so dark? How long had this been going on? Had it happened before while I was sleeping? Was that why I had been unable to sleep for days? Had something been keeping me awake on purpose? Or had something been trying to warn me? Our family shared so much with each other. My mom talked openly about faith, school, people at church, family problems, everything. But the word cult had never been mentioned in our house. Not once. I had never seen anything strange in my parents' room. I had never heard them talk about Satan or rituals or anything like that. Our house was full of crosses and pictures of Jesus. I had always thought those things meant safety. Now I wondered if they had been decorations. Or worse, cover. Eventually I knew I had to leave my room. If I stayed locked inside too long, someone would notice something was wrong. I had to act normal, at least until I understood what was happening. I opened my door slowly and stepped into the hallway. Everything looked the same as always. There was no red symbol on the floor downstairs. No candles. No robes. No strange smell of smoke. The living room was clean. The curtain hung in its normal place. Sunlight filled the house like it had no memory of the night before. I walked into the kitchen. My mom turned and smiled when she saw me. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said. Then she came over and hugged me. I went stiff in her arms. I could smell her perfume, the same one she always wore. Her hands felt warm and familiar on my back. She was my mother. She looked like my mother. She sounded like my mother. But all I could see in my mind was her face under that black hood, her mouth moving with the chant, candlelight flickering across her skin. She pulled back and looked at me. "Are you okay?" she asked. "You look pale." I forced myself to nod. "Just tired," I said. She touched my forehead like she used to do when I was little and had a fever. "You need to sleep better." I almost laughed. The sound rose in my throat but died before it came out. My dad came into the kitchen a few minutes later, buttoning his shirt and checking his phone. He looked at me, gave me a small smile, and said good morning like nothing had happened. Then he grabbed his keys, kissed my mom on the cheek, and left for work. My brother came in after that, stole a piece of toast from a plate, and disappeared back toward his room. Everything was normal. Too normal. Breakfast was already waiting for me at the dining table. Eggs, toast, and a glass of orange juice. Usually, I would have eaten without thinking. That morning, the sight of the food made my stomach twist. I remembered the candles, the red rice, the chanting, my mom smiling at me like nothing was wrong. I sat down, but I did not eat. Being alone in my own house suddenly felt dangerous. Every corner felt like it was hiding a secret. Every object looked different. The cross on the wall near the dining room no longer comforted me. It looked like something placed there to make visitors trust us. My mom had left her phone on the table. A loud buzz suddenly came from it, making me jump. I stared at the screen. Normally, I would never go through my mother's phone. I was not nosy. My parents had always trusted me, and I had trusted them. But after what I had seen, that trust was gone. I needed answers. I needed proof that I was not losing my mind. Another message came in. The screen lit up again. I looked toward the hallway. My mom was in another room. I could hear her moving around, opening drawers, humming softly to herself. My hands shook as I picked up her phone. I expected it to be locked, but it opened. Maybe she had not set a passcode. Maybe she had trusted me that much. Maybe she wanted me to find it. I still do not know. The messages were already on the screen. At first, my eyes could not understand what I was seeing. There were names I did not know, messages full of strange words, times, instructions, and references to the offering. My breathing became shallow as I scrolled. Then I saw my name, Brianna. The message said I had seen too much. Another said it no longer mattered because tonight was already chosen. Then I found the message that made my entire world collapse. My mother had written that I would be prepared before sunset, that the breakfast would keep me asleep through the day, that by midnight I would be ready for the sacrifice. The sacrifice, me, in the name of Satan. For a few seconds I could not move. I just stared at the phone in my hand while the words burned into my mind. The breakfast in front of me seemed to pulse on the plate. My mother had made it for me. She had smiled. She had hugged me. She had asked if I was okay. And she had planned to drug me. I dropped the phone onto the table. I did not think after that. I only moved. I ran to my room, grabbed my own phone, a few clothes, and my charger. I did not pack properly. I shoved whatever I could into a backpack. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost could not zip it. I listened for my mom the whole time, terrified she would appear in my doorway. Then I left. I did not say goodbye. I did not look back. I slipped out through the side door and ran down the street. My chest hurt. My legs burned. I kept expecting to hear my mother calling my name behind me, but the street stayed quiet. There was only one place I could go. Ashley's house. Ashley was my best friend. We had known each other since middle school. She was the person I trusted most outside my family. She knew my secrets, my stupid fears, my embarrassing stories. If I could tell anyone what had happened, it was her. When she opened the door and saw my face, she did not ask questions right away. She just pulled me inside. "What happened?" she asked. I tried to talk, but the words came out broken. I was crying before I even realized it. Ashley sat me on the couch and told me to breathe. She kept saying I was safe, that I was okay, that I needed to calm down. But I was not safe. I told her everything. I told her about the footsteps, the front door, the chanting, the candles, the black robes, the red symbol on the floor, my mom and dad, the messages, the breakfast, the plan to sacrifice me that night. Ashley's face changed as I spoke. At first, she looked confused, then scared, then serious in a way I had never seen from her before. She did not laugh. She did not tell me I was crazy. She just listened. When I finished, she hugged me tightly. "You can stay here," she said. "We'll figure it out." For the first time since 3 in the morning, I almost believed I might survive. Ashley told me to wait while she got me some water. I went to the bathroom to splash cold water on my face and try to calm down. I locked the door behind me without even thinking. My reflection in the mirror looked terrible. My eyes were red, my hair was messy, and my face looked pale and empty. I turned on the faucet and leaned over the sink. That was when I heard Ashley's voice from the hallway. It was low, but clear enough. "She's here at my house," she said. My heart stopped. I froze with both hands gripping the sink. For 1 second, I told myself she was calling the police. Maybe she was telling someone safe. Maybe she was calling her mom. Maybe she was trying to help me. Then I heard her say, yes, she told me everything. Her voice was calm, too calm. My stomach twisted. Was Ashley part of it too? Had my mom already called her? Had they known I would come here? Had I run from one trap straight into another? I backed away from the sink and looked around the bathroom. There was a small window above the bathtub. It was not big, but I thought I could fit through it if I tried hard enough. Outside, it led to the narrow side yard beside Ashley's house. Ashley knocked on the bathroom door. "Brianna?" she called. "Are you okay?" I did not answer. She knocked again, a little harder. "Brianna, open the door." Her voice sounded gentle, but I could not trust gentle anymore. My mother had sounded gentle too. My mother had hugged me after planning to drug me. My father had smiled at me after chanting in a robe. I am sitting on the bathroom floor right now, typing this as quietly as I can. Ashley is still outside the door. She keeps asking if I am okay. Every few seconds, her voice changes. Sometimes she sounds worried. Sometimes she sounds impatient. A few minutes ago, I heard another voice downstairs. I do not know whose it is. Maybe it is her mom. Maybe it is my mom. Maybe it is one of the people from the ritual. I am going to try the window soon. I do not know where I will go after that. I do not know who I can trust. The only people I ever believed would protect me may be the same people planning to end my life. And the worst part is that tonight has not even begun. Story 4, I do not know why Reddit is the only thing loading on my phone right now. I have tried everything else. My radio went dead the second I stepped inside this building. My phone keeps showing no signal, even though it had full service outside in the parking lot. Every time I try to call dispatch, the call fails before it even begins. I have restarted the phone twice. I have held it up near the ceiling. I have pressed it against the window. Nothing works. Then, after several minutes of trying different apps and websites like an idiot, this page somehow loaded. Maybe it is a glitch. Maybe text takes less signal than calls or messages. Maybe something in this building is blocking everything except the one place where I can scream into the dark and hope someone reads it. I do not know anymore, and at this point I do not care. I do not even know if this will reach anyone, but if it does, I need someone to understand what happened here. My name is not important right now. If they ever find me, my badge number, my body camera, and the case file will identify me. If they find the camera in one piece, it will show enough. At least, I hope it will. I am currently barricaded inside what used to be the security office of an abandoned family pizza restaurant. There is a filing cabinet shoved against the door, and I have pushed the desk against it too. Though I know that will not stop something strong enough for long. Something is moving through the halls outside. I do not know exactly what it is. I do not know if it is alive. I do not know if it was ever alive. But I know what it looks like, and I know it should not be able to move. The restaurant closed almost 8 years ago after a string of child disappearances. I am sure some people reading this will remember the old news reports. They were the kind of stories that stayed in town gossip long after the headlines stopped. A family restaurant where kids had birthday parties, ate pizza, played arcade games, and watched big costumed mascots dance on a stage. Then, children started vanishing. Not all at once. Not in a way that made the place shut down immediately. One child, 1 year. Another a few years later. Then more. Over the course of a decade, families came in with children and sometimes left without them. Security tapes were missing or damaged. Staff members changed their stories. The owners said they cooperated with every search. Investigators searched the dining area, kitchen, back rooms, offices, vents, storage closets, and even parts of the foundation. They brought dogs. They brought equipment. They questioned employees and former employees. They found rumors, bad records, and strange gaps in the building's history, but never enough physical evidence to explain what happened. Eventually, the restaurant shut down. People said it was because of money. Others said lawsuits killed it. Some said parents stopped bringing their children after the place became too famous for all the wrong reasons. The building was left behind, sitting near the edge of town like a rotten tooth no one wanted to pull out. Kids dared each other to break in. Teenagers spray-painted the walls. Local ghost hunters came and filmed videos outside the windows. Every few months, someone would call police after hearing noises from inside, but patrols never found anything except broken glass, old furniture, and animals nesting in the walls. Last week, our department received anonymous blueprints. They were mailed in a plain envelope with no return address. The paper was old, folded many times, and stained along the corners. At first, everyone thought it was fake. The official building plans had been checked years ago, and nothing like this had ever appeared. But the new blueprints showed a maintenance area below the restaurant, hidden behind a section of wall that had never been marked on any official plan. It was too detailed to ignore. There were service corridors, a repair bay, storage rooms, and what looked like a large mechanical access area underneath the back half of the building. Because I worked missing persons, I was assigned to verify whether the hidden section actually existed. It was supposed to be simple. Go in during daylight, take photos, check the wall indicated in the blueprint, confirm whether there was a passage. If there was, secure the area and call in a team. I was not supposed to search the whole underground section alone. I was not supposed to touch anything dangerous. I was not supposed to end up locked in an old security office, typing on Reddit while something made of metal waits outside. The building looked abandoned in the ordinary way when I arrived. Nothing about it warned me to turn around. The parking lot was cracked, with weeds pushing through the asphalt in long green lines. The windows were broken in several places, though most had been boarded up from the inside years ago. The sign above the entrance still showed the faded face of the restaurant's mascot, but almost all the paint had peeled away. It looked less like a cheerful animal and more like a skull wearing a party hat. The letters underneath were nearly unreadable. Wind moved trash across the lot. One of the front doors hung slightly crooked on its hinges. Before I entered, I completed a routine radio check. Dispatch came through crystal clear. The woman on the other end joked that I should not let the old costume scare me. Someone else in the background laughed and said the animatronics were probably still waiting to sing happy birthday. I laughed too. I wish I had kept talking. I wish I had stayed outside for one more minute. I wish that ordinary, stupid conversation had lasted just a little longer. Then I stepped through the front doors, and the radio turned into static. It happened instantly, not slowly, not like a weak signal fading in and out. One step outside, clear radio. One step inside, nothing but harsh white noise. I called dispatch again. Static. I stepped back toward the door and tried again, but by then the signal was already gone. My phone acted the same way. Outside it had shown full service. Inside it showed nothing. No bars, No emergency calls, no data. At the time, I told myself it was probably reinforced concrete, old steel, bad wiring, or some other boring explanation. Buildings do strange things to signals. I had been in basements and old government offices where radios failed. It was annoying, but not impossible. I kept moving. The first hour was quiet. I photographed the dining room, the stage, the arcade, the kitchen, the bathrooms, the employee hall, and the offices. Dust covered everything in a thick gray layer. Mold had spread across the wallpaper like dark bruises. Birthday banners still hung from the ceiling, but they were so faded I could not read the names anymore. Some tables were overturned, others were still set with old plastic plates, as if everyone had simply walked away in the middle of a party and never returned. The arcade machines stood silent, their screens black, their prize counters empty. A few stuffed toys had been left behind in the display case, their fur gray with dust, their button eyes reflecting my flashlight. The smell was bad from the start. Mildew, stale grease, damp carpet, mouse droppings, and the old sour odor of a place that had been closed too long. But underneath all of that, there was something else. A metallic smell, faint near the front of the building, stronger toward the back. At first, I thought it was rust. There was enough rust in the kitchen and maintenance areas to explain it. Old pipes, exposed metal, water damage. I wrote it down in my notes and kept going. The first strange thing I noticed was not something I saw. It was a sound. A slow metallic groan came from somewhere deeper in the building. It sounded like a chain shifting under too much weight. Not a little rattle. Not a pipe knocking. It was heavy, drawn out, and low, like something large had moved after being still for a very long time. I froze and listened. The sound came again. I followed it to the employee hallway. Every room there was empty except for the restroom at the end. I checked the storage closet first, then a small manager's office, then a break room with a rotted couch and a vending machine that had been smashed open. Nothing, no animals, no loose chains, no machinery, just dust and old trash. When I reached the restroom, I almost missed the second sound because it was so faint. It sounded like whispers. Not one voice, several, overlapping, too soft to understand. At first, I thought it might be air moving through broken pipes or wind pushing through the walls. I searched the room slowly, checking vents, damaged plumbing, ceiling panels, and anything that could hide a speaker. The whispering continued. It was strongest near the last stall. I rolled the stall door open with my flashlight raised. There was nothing inside but a cracked toilet, dead leaves, and dust. Still, the whispering was louder there. It seemed to come from behind the tiled wall. I stepped closer and pressed my ear against the cold tile. The whisper stopped. For a few seconds, there was complete silence. Then dust drifted down from the ceiling. A thin seam appeared in the wall. I backed away so fast I almost slipped. The tiled wall shifted inward with a quiet grind. An entire section moved back, then slid to the side, revealing a dark hallway behind it. No handle, no keypad, no obvious switch. It just opened. The moment the passage appeared, the whispering stopped completely, leaving behind a silence that felt too heavy, like the building itself was holding its breath. I stood there for longer than I should have. I knew protocol. I should have left immediately and called for backup from outside. But my radio was dead, my phone had no service, and I was standing in front of a hidden passage connected to a case involving missing children. I told myself I would only go far enough to confirm the space existed. Just a few photos. Just enough proof. Then I would leave. That was another mistake. The air in the passage was colder. It smelled like old machine oil, wet concrete, and rust. My flashlight beam showed narrow concrete walls, then stairs leading down. I took them carefully, one hand on the rail, the other holding my light. The steps were damp in places. At the bottom, the hallway opened into a large underground maintenance area, much bigger than the anonymous blueprints suggested. There were workbenches lined against the walls, shelves stacked with replacement parts, cracked plastic mascot heads, coils of wire, old tools, oil cans, and boxes labeled with faded marker. Heavy chains hung from rails fixed to the ceiling. Some disappeared into the darkness above. Others ended in hooks. At first, I thought they were part of a repair system, maybe used to lift heavy machines while mechanics worked on them. Then my flashlight moved across the far wall. A cracked mascot face stared back at me. I jerked the light away, then forced myself to look again. It was only a suit. Or that was what I told myself. A large animal mascot, roughly 2 meters tall, hung from reinforced hooks fixed into wall brackets. Its head leaned forward. Its arms hung loose. Its painted shell had cracked and peeled. Fabric had rotted away in strips, showing metal joints beneath. Rust stained the elbows, knees, and jaw. Black grease had dried down the torso in long streaks that looked too much like old blood. Then I saw another beside it, and another. There were 7 of them. 7 animatronics hung along the wall like bodies in a butcher's freezer. Each one was shaped like a different cheerful character, or had been once. A bear, a rabbit, a bird, something like a dog, and others too, damaged to name. Years of neglect had stripped away everything bright and friendly about them. Their eyes appeared empty. Their mouths hung open in stiff, broken smiles. Some had missing fingers. Some had exposed wires trailing from their necks. One had its chest panel hanging open, showing gears and dark cavities inside. I stood there and tried to be rational. They were machines. Large, old, broken machines. They had probably been moved down here before the restaurant closed. Maybe this was where staff repaired them. Maybe the official blueprints left this place out because of illegal construction or insurance fraud. That was strange, yes, but not impossible. It did not mean the machines could move. It did not mean the stories were true. It did not mean anything supernatural had happened. I lifted my camera and started documenting the room. I approached the nearest mascot, the one with the cracked face. Its head was split down the middle, exposing tangled wiring inside. The plastic around its mouth had warped into a permanent grin. I leaned closer to photograph the damage. My flashlight caught something deep inside the empty eye sockets. 2 pale circles. They were far back in the darkness, where there should have been nothing. For a second, I thought they were reflections, maybe old glass lenses, maybe metal washers. Then they moved. The mascot's fingers flexed with soft metallic clicks. My breath stopped. Its head rose slowly. Not all at once, inch by inch. Metal joints groaned inside its neck. The cracked grin lifted until it faced me directly. The chain above it tightened and creaked as the full weight of the machine shifted. The hook bent under the pressure. I stumbled backward. The machine lowered itself from the wall, not dropped, not fell, lowered itself. Its feet touched the concrete floor with a heavy sound that echoed through the maintenance bay. Then, along the wall, the other mascots began lifting their heads, one after another, slow, deliberate. Every empty eye socket turned toward me. All 7 were staring. Training does strange things to you. People think police officers are brave all the time. That is not true. Training does not remove fear. It only gives your body something to do before your brain catches up. Mine decided to run. I turned and ran for the stairs. Behind me, heavy footsteps began moving across the concrete. Slow, but strong. Each step came with the scrape of metal against the floor. It should have been easy to outrun something that large and damaged. It should have been clumsy. But somehow, every sound it made seemed closer than it should have been. The footsteps did not hurry, yet they gained on me. Metal scraped against concrete. Chains groaned above. Something clicked rapidly, like teeth snapping together. I reached the hallway and nearly slammed into the wall as I turned. My flashlight beam bounced wildly. I climbed the stairs, shoved through the hidden restroom passage, and stumbled into the employee hall. I could hear them below, not running, climbing one slow step at a time. The building felt different now. The rooms that had been empty before seemed to watch me. My own breathing was too loud. I tried the radio again while moving. Nothing. I tried my phone. No service. I headed for the front doors, but somewhere behind me, metal slammed against a wall with enough force to shake dust from the ceiling. I panicked and took the nearest turn. That is how I ended up in the old security office. The door still had a working lock, though I do not trust it. I shoved a filing cabinet against it, then pushed a desk behind that. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my flashlight twice. The room is small, with old monitors stacked on a counter, a dead phone mounted on the wall, and a narrow window in the door. There are papers on the floor, old schedules, incident logs, and employee notices yellowed with age. A small fan sits in the corner, covered in dust. The air smells like mildew, old paper, and the same metallic stink that led me to the back of the building. This is where I am now. My radio is still dead. My phone still says there is no service. But somehow Reddit is working well enough for me to type this. I do not know why. I do not know how long it will last. For a while I could hear them outside. Heavy footsteps moving through the hall. Slow scraping sounds. Metal joints clicking and turning. Once, something dragged along the wall just outside the office, and the sound made my teeth hurt. Another time, I heard one of them stop directly outside the door. I could see a shadow through the small lower crack. It stayed there for almost 5 minutes. I held my breath until my chest burned. Then, it moved away. I have not heard footsteps for several minutes now, and that scares me more than when I could hear them. When they were moving, at least I knew where they were. Now the silence feels planned, like they are waiting, like they understand the door, like they know I will have to look eventually. There is something else too. I was going through the old papers on the floor, hoping to find a phone number, a map, anything useful. Most of it is useless. Employee rules, cleaning schedules, maintenance logs. But one page was different. It was folded and tucked behind the dead security monitors. It looks like part of an incident report, but most of the writing is smeared. I can only read a few lines. Do not enter maintenance alone. Do not respond to voices from behind walls. If mascots are found off stage after closing, do not approach. The last line is written in pen, harder and darker than the rest. They mimic children first, adults second. I do not know what that means, but about 2 minutes after I read it, I heard a child crying somewhere in the hallway. Not a recording, not a speaker, a real child, sobbing softly. It said, "Please help me." I almost moved the filing cabinet. I swear to God, I almost did. Then, the voice changed. It became dispatch. The same woman who answered my radio check before I came inside. Her voice came from just beyond the door, clear and calm. "Unit, open the door. Maintenance is here. My radio is dead. My phone has no service. No one knows I am in this office. No one could have reached the building that fast without me hearing sirens or vehicles outside. I did not open the door. Now it is quiet again. I can see a little of the hallway through the narrow window, but not enough. The glass is dirty and cracked, and the office lights are making reflections. I am going to turn off my flashlight and look through it once I finish this paragraph. I know that is stupid. I know I should stay low and wait. But if one of them is standing right outside, I need to know. If they are gone, maybe I can reach the front doors. Maybe I can get outside far enough for my phone to call dispatch. Maybe I can still bring people back here and show them what is under this place. I do not want to look. There is a smear on the window now. It was not there before. It is at about eye level, but too high for a person unless they were very tall. It looks dark, almost black in the light from my phone. Grease, maybe, or old oil. It is sliding down the glass slowly, like something on the other side pressed its face there and pulled away. I am going to look now. If this post uploads, please send help to the old Ashford Family Pizza building on the east side of town. Tell them to check the restroom at the end of the employee hall. Tell them the wall opens. Tell them there is a maintenance bay underneath. Tell them the missing children might not have ever left the building. And if anyone from dispatch reads this, do not send one officer. Do not send two. Burn the place down if you have to. I just looked through the window. The hallway is empty. But the mascot on the sign outside, the one with almost all the paint peeled off, is standing at the far end of the corridor. It is too big to fit inside the hallway without bending its neck sideways. And it is wearing my voice now. It keeps saying my name. Story 5. That was one of the questions doctors always asked me, ever since I was little. Are you allergic to any medicine? Every time I gave the same simple answer. Yes, tropulin. The nurse would type it into the computer, ask a few more routine questions, and then move on like it was nothing. I never explained it unless someone asked for details. Most people heard the word allergy and thought of hives, swollen lips, a closing throat, or a rash spreading across the skin. But it was never that kind of allergy for me. At least, that was what I always believed. It was more of a mental reaction, a bad one. A childhood reaction that left behind a cloudy, frightening memory I never liked thinking about. It sat somewhere deep in my mind, packed away with all the other fears from when I was young. I remembered enough to say I could not take that medicine. I remembered enough to answer yes at the doctor's office, but I never had a real reason to go back and study those memories closely. Not until this morning. When I was 10 years old, I had my tonsils removed. It was a normal surgery, and everyone told me it would be over quickly. I remember being scared before it happened, mostly because I hated hospitals and hated the idea of doctors cutting anything out of me. But the surgery went fine. Afterward, my throat hurt badly. My voice sounded weak and strange, and swallowing felt like pushing broken glass down my neck. The doctor prescribed tropulin to help reduce the swelling. That was when everything started. At the time, I was an only child, and my mother treated me like I was the center of her world. She had always been protective of me, but after the divorce, she became even more careful. My parents had separated about a year before my surgery. My mother never sat me down and explained the full story in a calm way. I picked it up from pieces. I heard parts of their arguments through walls. I heard neighbors whispering when they thought I was not listening. I heard adults use that soft voice they use around children when they are trying not to say too much. From all of that, I understood that my mother had seen my father with another woman. More than once. That alone was shocking to me. Any child would be upset by something like that. But for me, it was more than upsetting. It did not make sense. Even now, as an adult, it still does not fit the picture I had of my father. My dad loved my mother. I know every kid wants to believe that, but I saw it. He told her he loved her constantly, and he showed it in all the small, quiet ways that mean more than big speeches. He brought her flowers almost every week, not for birthdays or anniversaries, but just because. On rainy evenings, he would put music on in the living room and slow dance with her while I sat on the couch pretending to be embarrassed. Once, he even bought her a kitten, even though he was allergic to cats. When she told him it was a bad idea, he laughed and said he would just take a few Benadryls every day and everything would be fine. So when the accusations started, I did not understand them. The strangest part was that my father never admitted to anything. Not once. He did not try to explain it away as a business meeting. He did not say the woman was only a friend. He did not give some half-baked excuse like guilty people do when they are caught. He denied that it had happened at all. I remember one night especially clearly. I was in my bedroom with the door shut, but their voices came through the crack under the door and through the thin walls. They were in the kitchen, yelling. "Whoever you saw, it wasn't me," my father said. His voice was firm, but there was something else in it too. Something desperate. "You think I don't know what you look like, David?" My mother snapped. "You think I don't know how you walk? What your voice sounds like?" I was right there. I sat there for half an hour while you drank red wine with her. "It wasn't me," he said again. This time it sounded almost like he was begging her to believe him. "Oh, so who was it, David?" she said bitterly. "Your long-lost twin?" The divorce was finalized soon after. My mother got full custody of me, and the house was sold. We moved into a smaller place, and I saw my father every couple of weeks. He never spoke to me about the affair. He never tried to turn me against my mother, and he never used me as a messenger between them. But sometimes, when he looked at me, I could tell he wanted to say something. I could tell he wanted to promise me he had not done what she said. Instead, he always said the same thing when he dropped me off. "I love you. Never forget that." I never did. Just as my mother and I were beginning to settle into the new house, my throat started hurting. At first, we thought it was only a bad infection, but after a few appointments, the doctors decided I needed my tonsils taken out. The surgery happened, I came home, and then I started taking tropulin. I took the first dose the day after surgery. I was still in bed, weak and sore, with blankets pulled up to my chest and a glass of water on the nightstand. My mother did everything she could to keep me happy. She brought me ice cream, video games, puzzles, and soup I could barely swallow. She checked on me constantly, touching my forehead and asking if I needed anything. That evening, she went to the store for groceries and a few get-well-soon balloons she said I needed, even though I told her I did not. By the time she came back, it was almost dark outside. The sky beyond my window had turned a deep gray blue, and the streetlights were just beginning to glow. She gave me the pill before bed. I remember the bitter taste coating my tongue even after I swallowed it. My throat still hurt, but the pain had become dull and far away. The medicine made my head feel heavy, like my thoughts were moving through warm water. My mother kissed my forehead and wished me good night before leaving for her room. I fell asleep quickly. Then I woke up suddenly. My heart was beating hard, but I did not know why. The room was dark except for the faint red glow of my alarm clock. I turned my head and looked at the time. 3:17. My mouth felt dry. I thought about getting a drink of water, but before I could move, I saw something near the wall across from my bed. A figure. I froze. Someone was standing there, pressed close to the wall. It was a man. Tall, broad, muscular. He stood completely straight, facing my bed. His face was hidden in the darkness, but I could see the outline of his shoulders, arms, and head. At first, my brain tried to explain it away. Maybe it was my coat rack. Maybe it was a jacket hanging in a strange way. Maybe it was a shadow made by the furniture. But I kept looking, and the more I looked, the more certain I became. It was a man. My body refused to move. I could not call for my mother. I could not sit up. I could not even breathe normally. I squeezed my eyes shut like a little kid playing hide and seek, as if not seeing him would somehow make me disappear from his sight. With my eyes closed, I tried to think. Maybe it was an intruder. That thought terrified me even more. If someone had broken into our house, why was he standing there in my room? Why was he not stealing anything? Why was he just watching me? After what felt like forever, I forced myself to open my eyes again. I expected him to be closer, but he was gone. The wall was empty. The room was still. There was no sound except the low hum of the house at night. I told myself I had imagined it. Maybe I was still half asleep. Maybe the medicine had made me dream with my eyes open. I wanted to get up and turn on the light, but I could not make myself leave the bed. So I lay there, staring at the dark wall, until sleep pulled me under again. The next morning, I woke slowly. My throat ached, and my head felt foggy. For a few minutes, I almost forgot what had happened during the night. It came back while I was getting dressed, and when it did, it felt unreal. The memory was hazy around the edges, like a dream. I had heard about night terrors on television and from friends. They were supposed to feel real while they were happening. That had to be what it was. Still, the image of that dark figure stayed with me. I went downstairs and found my mother sitting at the kitchen table, eating cereal. She looked up as soon as I walked in. "Hi, honey," she said softly. "You didn't have to get up so early. Why don't you go back to bed?" "No, I'm okay," I said. My voice sounded rough because of my throat. I had a bad dream last night. She tensed a little. It was quick, but I noticed it. "Oh, sweetie," she said. "I'm sorry. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. It was no big deal. She looked at me with soft, serious eyes. "Remember, I won't let anything hurt you. Ever." That comforted me. At 10 years old, I believed her completely. I spent the rest of the day in my room, playing video games with friends and eating soft food. That evening, my mother and I played a board game, and I beat her. By bedtime, I had almost forgotten the figure from the night before. Then she gave me the second pill. I took it because I had no reason not to. I lay down on my soft plaid pillow, tired from the day, and fell asleep almost as soon as my head touched it. I woke up again in the middle of the night. This time, the clock read 4:21. I did not know what had woken me. There had been no loud noise, no touch, no voice. But the second I opened my eyes, I looked toward the foot of my bed. He was there. The same man from the night before. Only this time he was not hidden in the shadows. He stood facing me, mouth closed, hands clenched into fists at his sides. His head was nearly bald. He had a short brown beard and mustache. His eyes were light blue. His face was cold and still and completely familiar. It was my father. I froze again, unable to decide whether this was better or worse than the shadowy man from the night before. Part of me wanted to feel relieved because I knew that face. It was not a monster. It was not a stranger. But another part of me knew something was deeply wrong. My father would never stand silently in my room at 4 a.m. He would never stare at me without blinking. I had heard people say night terrors felt real, but I had not understood how real. I could feel the cold air on my arms. I could hear my own breathing. I could see the tiny details of his face. The shape of his beard, the shine in his blue eyes, the tightness in his fists. My heart pounded so loudly that it filled my head. I do not know why I decided to speak. "Dad," I croaked. My voice was small and broken from my swollen throat. I blinked. He was gone. There was no sound, no footsteps, no door opening. 1 second he was there, and the next he was not. I could not handle it anymore. I reached for the old flip phone my mother had given me for emergencies and texted her. I told her I had another nightmare. She came into my room less than a minute later. By then, I was crying. The fear had finally broken through me, and tears were running down my face. "Oh, honey," she whispered, wrapping her arms around me. "It's okay. Mom's right here." It was Dad. I cried. He was standing there, just staring at me. "It's okay," she said. None of it was real. She held me for a long time. Eventually, she walked me to her room, and I slept beside her for the rest of the night. The next day went almost the same as the one before it. I played games, watched television, and tried not to think about what I had seen. Rain fell over the neighborhood for most of the day, soft and steady at first, then harder in the evening. My father came by for a little while. He brought me more ice cream and a new board game. My parents tried to act polite around each other for my sake, but even at 10 years old, I could see the tension. My mother's eyes hardened when she opened the door and saw him. My father looked awkward and sad when he said hello to her. Seeing his face in real life after the nightmare made me nervous. But I reminded myself that the dream had not been real. My father was standing there in front of me, normal and kind, asking how my throat felt and telling me he hoped I would feel better soon. He stayed for a short time and left just before dark. It was pouring outside, but he walked out into the rain without a jacket. That night, my mother asked if I wanted to sleep in her room again. I said no. I wanted to be brave. I wanted to prove to myself that I was not a baby. But as soon as she handed me the pill, dread settled over me. Outside, thunder rumbled softly. The air conditioner hummed in the corner like a swarm of insects hiding in the walls. I swallowed the pill and lay down. Sleep came quickly. When I woke again, the red letters of my alarm clock read 5:01. The rain had not stopped. This time, I did not have to look across the room. He was much closer. He stood only about 3 feet from the side of my bed, looking down at me. He still had my father's face. He still had that cold, steady stare. I looked from his face down to his body, and that was when I saw what he held in his right hand, a large pocket knife. It was open. The handle was red. My father had one just like it. Before I could move, he stepped closer. A slight smile appeared on his face. Not a warm smile. Not my father's smile. It was small and wrong, like something trying to copy affection. His knees touched the side of my bed frame. I tried to pull away, but I could not move. My body felt locked in place. I could not scream. I could not lift my arms. I could only stare as he raised the knife. Then he spoke. "I love you," he said softly. "Never forget that." His voice was exactly my father's. That was what broke something inside me. As the knife moved toward me, I found my voice. I screamed. It was not a normal scream. It was wild and animal-like, full of terror, like prey caught in the mouth of something hungry. The figure's face changed. For the first time, he looked shocked. Then, instead of vanishing, he ran. He turned and rushed out of my room. His footsteps pounded down the hallway, then down the stairs. I heard them clearly. They were real, loud, heavy footsteps. A moment later, my mother burst into my room. She glanced behind her quickly before running to my bed. I could move again. I reached for her, sobbing so hard I could barely speak. I kept saying he had a knife. I kept saying Dad was going to kill me. She held me tightly and told me it was not real. She said it again and again, but there was something nervous in her voice that I did not understand at the time. I thought she was only shaken because her son had screamed like he was being murdered in the middle of the night. Neither of us slept after that. She took me to her room, and we lay there until the sun finally rose. That morning, my mother spent a long time on her computer. After reading for a while, she told me she believed the tropulin was causing the night terrors. She called the doctor and said I would not be taking it anymore. I slept in her bed the next night. The dreams stopped. No man in the corner. No father with a knife. No shadow standing against the wall. For about a week I stayed in my mother's room. Every morning, she asked me the same question. "Any nightmares?" When I told her no, she always looked relieved and said it had to have been the tropulin. After a while, I moved back into my own room. Life slowly returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after a divorce and a surgery and those terrible nights. Then, a couple of weeks later, my mother got a phone call while we were eating breakfast. I did not know who it was at first. She answered, listened quietly, and then her face changed. She did not scream. She did not drop the phone. She only became very still. Later, I learned it had been the police. My father had not shown up to work for 2 days, so one of his co-workers asked for a welfare check. The police went to his house and found him dead. The coroner said it was a heart attack. A tragic but natural death. No foul play. Nothing suspicious. Everyone was shocked. My father was only in his 40s. He had never had heart problems. He had seemed healthy. Strong even. I was heartbroken. I believe my mother was heartbroken too, but she showed it in a strange way. At the funeral, she did not cry. She stood there quietly, dressed in black, staring forward while people whispered around us. The neighborhood women seemed almost pleased by it, because it gave them something new to gossip about. They said she was cold. They said maybe she had stopped loving him long before he died. I always told myself she was staying strong for me. After that, it was just me and Mom. Years passed. I grew up. I went to college. I moved out of state. Now I'm 25 years old, working for a marketing firm and living alone in a one-bedroom apartment. For a long time, I barely thought about any of it. The divorce, the surgery, the medicine, the nightmares, my father's death. They all became part of the past. Sad, strange, but distant. Then last night happened. I woke up suddenly from a dream where I was falling off a cliff. It was a common nightmare, the kind almost everyone has at some point. My heart was racing, and my hands were gripping the blanket. I was about to close my eyes and go back to sleep when I saw him. A man standing by the wall across from my bed. Tall, muscular, still shaped like my father. All the memories came rushing back so hard that I felt like I was 10 years old again. The dark bedroom. The red numbers on the clock. The cold stare. The knife. The voice. My first thought was that it had to be another dream, just like all those years ago. I was an adult now, and I tried to act like one. I told myself I was half asleep. I told myself old trauma could come back in strange ways. I told myself there was no reason to panic. I forced my eyes shut and eventually fell asleep again. When I woke this morning, I remembered the figure immediately. A shiver moved through me, but daylight made it feel less real. I hoped it was a one-time thing. I hoped stress had caused it. I hoped the nightmares were not coming back after all these years. Then I got out of bed and walked toward the bathroom. My foot hit something small and metal on the floor. It slid across the room and bumped against the wall with a soft thud. I stopped. There was something lying near the baseboard. I walked over slowly and picked it up. It was a red pocket knife. I do not own any pocket knives. For a few seconds, I only stood there, staring at it. My mind tried to reject what I was seeing. It could not be real. It could not be in my apartment. It could not be the same kind of knife I had seen in the nightmare when I was a child. But it was real. Cold metal. Red handle. A knife that had no reason to be there. Then other memories began lining up in my mind in a way they never had before. My father's so-called affair. His constant denial. My mother insisting she had seen him with another woman. My father saying it was not him. My mother asking if it had been his long-lost twin. The figure in my room with my father's face. The night it ran away instead of disappearing. The footsteps. My mother's nervousness. My father's sudden death. My mother's dry eyes at the funeral. And then I remembered something else. It was from the night before my father was found dead. I had almost forgotten it, or maybe I had buried it because I did not want to understand it. I woke up suddenly that night too, but there was no figure in my room. No man by the wall, no knife. I only heard footsteps in the hall. Someone was coming up the stairs. The third step from the top creaked, the way it always did. A moment later, I saw my mother. She was pale and breathing hard. Her keys jingled in her hand. Her face was calm, too calm. She walked down the hall, went into her room, and quietly closed the door. At the time, I assumed she had gone outside to get something from the car. I fell back asleep almost immediately. Now I do not know what to believe. I do not know if the medicine made me see things. I do not know if something that looked like my father was really coming into my room. I do not know if my mother knew more than she ever told me. And I do not know who or what left my father's red pocket knife on my apartment floor last night.